actually given an incredibly, incredibly difficult topic to talk about: journalism and credibility. I mean, who even needs journalism in the world of new media and social networks? Why do we even need journalism? Is there anyone in this room who does not use social networks? Raise your hands. Oh, wow. We have a person, one in the whole room. You know, there are statistics to back up this trend. In Ukraine, there are 48% of people who say that they consume news from social networks. That's their primary source of information. Television is only 3% ahead. 41% of news is consumed from relatives and friends. So who needs journalists in the modern world? If you look at the trust in media in Ukraine, the picture is even grimmer. Last year, there was a poll by Nielsen that discovered that only 32% of Ukrainians trust journalists. 32%, less than a third. 2 years ago, there was a poll that showed, no, hang on, it was 38%. A Gallup poll that showed 38% thought that journalism was bad and only serving the bad goals, the bad aims, the bad purposes. It existed, it was either bad or very bad. That was in 2014. So how did we come to that? That journalists are not trusted, that journalists are not read, they're not watched, and the trend is growing. How did we come to that? Of course, there are worldwide trends that sort of back this up. Digital media are taking over, social networks are taking over, blogging is taking over the world. Journalists are losing ground very fast. There are also Ukraine-specific reasons for low trust in journalism. In Ukraine, we have a virtual monopoly in the media sector. Most of the media holdings are owned by oligarchs, which basically set the trend and dictate what those media holdings report. Those holdings are a part of a larger food chain, and it goes like this. The oligarchs typically own a core business. The core business subsidizes the media. The media then promote a specific political agenda, political party, a person, and that person or political party then provides certain benefits to the core business of the oligarch. And so the vicious circle closes. The media is just a PR branch of an oligarch business. And this is why there's very little trust in that. And this is why some issues get underreported, some issues get overreported, some issues get sensationalized. That's our reality. And after the revolution, the war hit, and we faced another challenge, a very split country with a very schizophrenic agenda and a big, big moral issue, whether the media should be patriotic or truthful, whether we should report the truth or we should help the government fight the war. This issue is still not resolved in Ukraine. There's still a massive debate going on about it. And a lot of trends in the media environment are actually stem from that debate. This is why it's very important to have independent media organizations like ours, like Hromadske, to report the news as it is. And that was the aim with which Hromadske was created in 2013. But I am getting ahead of myself, and I will get back to credibility, which we lost, which the media lost in Ukraine. And in my opinion, credibility basically has two components. One component is trust, and another component is expertise. And I think trust is also broken down into several sort of factors. One of them is subjective. You either like the personality or you dislike the personality. Either you think they have charisma, you tend to trust them more. These are very subjective factors. There's very little you can do about it. But it's also, there are also more measurable factors in trust. you have to be able to report close to the ground. You have to be able to report close to your editorial policy or perceived editorial policy. You have to have commitment and a track record of credible reporting. And it enforces credibility and trust. Expertise is another factor that contributes heavily to credibility. And expertise also is built up of many different ways. Expertise means that you have to have the skill. You have to have the skill to be able to find the story, to report the story, to tell the story in a way that will be understandable for the audience. And you have to be able to do that. You have to have a great deal of storytelling skills. You have to also have professional integrity. You can't say something is good one day and then turn around and say something is bad the next day. That means professional integrity. You're going to lose your professional integrity if you do that. And you have to have a great degree you have to have your moral compass set right. You have to know what you're doing. If you say you're against war crimes, it doesn't have to matter what side of the front line it's happening at. You have to report the crime on both sides of the front line. And that if you claim that you're against violation of human rights. All these factors seem kind of easy, but in Ukraine they're still a matter of a huge debate. And because of that, and because of the media environment, the specifics of media environment, credibility is very, very hard to build in Ukraine. First of all, it takes institutional strength. And the only institutions, media institutions in Ukraine, as I said, are owned by oligarchs. And that's difficult to fight for independent media like ourselves. It takes a hierarchy based on merit. And that is something that you rarely find in newsrooms in Ukraine. And this is something that we are trying very hard to build at Hromadske now at this stage of transition that we are at. It also takes flexibility to be able to respond to the needs of the audience. And that is very difficult because, first of all, you have to understand that you have to admit sometimes that you don't understand the needs of the audience and go back to the basics and learn. You have to admit your mistakes. Then you have to have enough skill and enough help to be able to understand what those needs of the audience are. And then you have to have different skills to actually transform your programming and transform your effort to be able to hit the mark, to be able to report to the audience needs. It also takes extreme rigor and thoroughness on a very consistent basis to have credibility and trust. Because if you get one headline wrong, and it goes through your social networks, it goes through your Twitter, through your Facebook, you get mocked for days and sometimes weeks. You lose reach, you lose your audience. It happens very fast in the digital world. We've had that happen to us very recently. We lost almost 250,000 of reach on Facebook this week alone because we got a headline wrong. But we admitted the mistake and we're trying to correct it. You have to have the stamina to go through changes and to admit your mistakes, to build up your institution. And that is something that's very, very difficult in an unpredictable environment like Ukraine. And we are trying to do that as well. We're trying to develop stamina and we're trying to develop support so that we can support our staff and we can support the standards that we take on ourselves, the editorial policy that we subscribe to, and the long-term story that needs to be reported in Ukraine to get the credibility that we need. And, you know, I think I've pretty much described how difficult it is to get credibility. And this is why I think that institutionally journalism is not going to go anywhere. Because blogging and social networks is great, but blogging is about fun, is about personal popularity, is about expressing yourself, but it's not what journalism is about. Journalism equals responsibility. Journalism equals long-term responsibility. And this is something that journalism needs to be responsible to fulfill its very, very basic function. And this function is to inform. Journalism is often called the fourth estate, and this is why. Because its function in informing the society, the people, the individual, is very unique. There is no other institution in the society that is tasked with this specific function. Information, daily, up-to-date, timely, accurate information, informing the society. A lot of other functions are built on top of this function. Policy making, for example, diplomacy, military strategy is often built on information provided by journalists. Personal decisions are taken based on information provided by journalists. There was a famous case when the journalists misreported that separatists left a particular town in east of Ukraine, and people moved back only to find themselves trapped. That's poor work of journalism, and that shows you how the journalists have to be responsible and take their job very seriously, because lives can depend on it, sometimes quite literally. So credibility is very, very difficult to achieve. And my organization, Hromadske.UA, which was started by journalists in 2013, is trying to do just that. It's trying to become the most credible, the most independent, the most informative and trustworthy organization in Ukraine. We know that we're at the very beginning of the way, but hey, every long road starts with the first step. We have taken our first steps and are very excited with the road ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's working. Question. You said a lot about that 38% is the number of people who thinks that journalism is just doing bad things, that credibility
That
is
was in
important.
2013,
yes.
or 14.
So how would you, to switch to, what is a success for you in terms of building this credibility? And I don't mean the big success. How do you define, let's say, a small success?
You can break it down to metrics, even. I mean, how often you're quoted, how often, not just by the media, but by policymakers, for example, right? How often you become the trendsetter in the society. And an organization with a public mission like ours should be doing that. Our mission is to become the informational space for the sustainable development of a society and active individual. So if we make a single step towards that goal, we think it's success.
Great, thank you and good luck.
Thank you.